Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Shout out to everyone on the chat, our members, Fun to be Blonde, Dukes, and everyone else in the bushes. I hope everyone is having a great night. Barbie's here in the house. Shout out to you, Barbie. Barbie, we will be doing the Brittany Murphy tomorrow, so you can join us. You have some time to catch up. I know you, I saw your comments. I just wanted to make sure you knew you could catch up. It's Hawks Baby Girls in the chat. Shout out to everyone. Guys, I'm sounding a little bit better, I think. I do have the occasional cough, so I am gonna have to like turn my head away. Caroline is in the house. Shout out to you. Shout out to everyone. Janet's in the house. Oh my God, I love seeing everybody gathering. I'm just, this is a subject very near and dear to my heart for so many reasons. And ah, this issue of immigration and border separation for first of all, because of just obviously members, families, right? Coco Renee, shout out to you. Welcome. I love how you guys use these emojis. Let me tell you, every time I look at the chat and I see all these little emojis, I'm like, oh my God, I love it. I just wish I could see it on StreamYard, but I have another device where I'm able to watch them. So it's pretty cool. Yes, shout out to our new subscribers. Our channel has been growing. So I have a little announcement to make too. Our backup page, we've applied for monetization. Yeah, so we are under review at this point, and hopefully we will get there. I'm very excited because I think that that is going to be the channel where we get to cut a little bit loose and we get to you know file our grievances to YouTube if they even listen to us, right? We get to have a little fun. We're going to be dropping some information in that channel as well this weekend. So if you're out in the bushes and you're you're not a subscriber, but you like the drama and you like to see what's going on, that's probably the channel to go to, because you'll get plenty of that as well. Shout out to everyone again on the chat, our new members. Yes. Wow. I'm looking at your comment, Caroline. She says, I've been dealing with immigration for 2 years. Hola, non-fathomable. How are you doing? Um, Caroline, I am really sorry about that. And, the issue of immigration, believe it or not, um, it impacts a lot of people, citizen or not. Okay. Naturalized or not, right? Whether you live near the border or not, it is an issue that impacts a lot of people. Okay. And so for me, it is a very big issue near and dear to my heart for obvious reasons, right? But also for the fact that a lot of the policies that we make and a lot of the things that we vote on, we're not always very well aware or well versed. And I'm guilty of it as well. We can always do a better job about, getting a little bit more educated. So when the week that I was sick and I was out, um, the issue of families being separated in the border was a huge thing. It was actually trending because 60 Minutes did a little expose. Now today, okay, the New York Times, it was either today or yesterday, they dropped some video of the Biden administration approving um, children being flown into the country at night. So people like the administration is not sharing this information. So it kind of hit the media and everybody's like going a little bit crazy. So I don't think this is an issue of whether you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat. Okay. This is an issue of, are you human? Are you a humanitarian? Do you see the issues as they are? Okay. And even whether you're for or against immigration, you have to know that whatever you go for, either way, it's a double edged sword. So I'm going to tell you what I've been doing while I've been sick. Because believe it or not, I've been working while I've been sick. Um, I got in contact with a couple of nonprofits. Okay. Um, I reached out to them because I wanted to interview a family that had been separated by the border, by the administration specific to Trump. Okay. And I got in contact. There's a one specific organization that let me use their information and their website. And so this is the Witness at the Border organization. Okay. So we're going to do a really quick just look into what this looks like because, like I said, immigration, whether you're up in the border and you're seeing it or you're not and you're voting, it's something that does impact you, believe it or not. And I think it's an issue that we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it because if you think that it doesn't impact you, it does. It really, really does. So in January of 2019, okay, the Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration introduced the Migrant Protection Protocols. You guys might have heard of that. It's called the MPP, okay, or Remain in Mexico MPP. All right. So what MPP does, it would send people arriving at the U.S. southern borders fleeing violence and persecution in their home countries back to Mexico. Okay. And to wait, basically, they would have to go back and wait for asylum. And so they would have to wait for an asylum hearing before the U.S. immigration judges. Now, there was a change to this MPP policy recently when Biden came to office. Now, it's being said that Biden is going back to that initiative. And so I reached out to this organization because they actually are in the front of the borders. And I thought this was a very interesting thing to kind of talk about and bring about here. Okay. So let's do this and let me put this comments down. And we're definitely, yes, trigger warning. Absolutely. I'm going to look at your comments because I'm seeing a lot of comments here and you guys have a lot of information and thoughts to this. And it's important. It's very much important. So shout out to this organization that let me use their material.
Trump hasn't built his wall, but he's found other ways to create an invisible force field at the border. The main thing his administration's doing there is a policy called MPP, the Migrant Protection Protocols. Under this cruel regime, tens of thousands of people who ask for our help are being dumped back into Mexico to fend for themselves. Let's go through it. Here's how things worked before Trump. Someone fleeing persecution in their country could come to the US to ask for help. First, they would be processed in a detention center. Then, they would be released in the US or kept in detention while their asylum case worked through the courts. It was far from a perfect system, and it's hard to win asylum, but it did give most people a chance to find a lawyer, go to their court hearings, and maybe even stay with family. The whole process could take months or even years. Now, under Trump, when people flee to the US and ask for our help, we send them back into Mexico to wait out the months in between their asylum court hearings. Many end up in makeshift refugee camps, like this one in Matamoros, Mexico. That's because they're dropped over the border with nothing. No real explanation, no support, just a pile of papers, mainly in English, which few understand. This is MPP. And we're not putting people just any place in Mexico. MPP is intentionally stranding them in some of the most dangerous towns in the world, just across the border. Places like Matamoros and Nuevo Laredo, which are run by cartels. They systematically prey on migrants by kidnapping, extorting, and even killing them. In fact, since MPP started in January 2019, there have been 816 reports of rape, kidnapping, assault, and murder of asylum seekers in Mexico. This includes 201 kidnappings or attempted kidnappings of children. The US government knows this. The State Department has even issued do not travel warnings for some of these areas. That's the same threat level as Syria and Iraq. If people in MPP manage to avoid the cartels and stay alive, they're still basically homeless in a country they don't know.
The government of Mexico has agreed to provide them while they're waiting in Mexico with appropriate humanitarian protections for the duration of their stay.
But Raíces saw it firsthand. There's no organized access to dignified housing, food, education, work, medical care, or legal support.
Tuvimos que agarrar cartones para acostarnos ahí con nuestros niños, sin una cobija, sin nada. Pues ahí estuve durmiendo 15 días yo.
Living on the street, children are especially vulnerable. Most asylum seekers are only supported by volunteers and handouts. Stuck in Mexico, it's almost impossible for people to find a lawyer to represent them in the US. Only 2% have been able to get legal representation. With the odds stacked against them, only 0.1% have been granted asylum. And MPP is happening on a huge scale. Like family separation before, this is now the policy affecting asylum seekers at the border. More than 60,000 people have been sent back to Mexico under MPP. At least 16,000 of them are children under 18. At least 4,300 are toddlers under 5, and almost 500 babies under 12 months have been sent back. MPP has been horrific for asylum seekers. But what does our government think about it?
As the acting commissioner of CBP, MPP has absolutely been successful.
This is what success looks like to our government. Does this look like success to you?
Now, to be fair, right, that initiative stopped June 1st of 2021. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't a cluster mess of what's going on right now at the border. Okay. Shout out to It's Hawks Baby Girls, who says it's a horribly slow process. I entered with an immigration attorney and I realized I was too emotional for immigration law. And I definitely I do not blame you, because I think that the processes of immigration are very cumbersome, and I don't want us to get confused. And I did pull up another clip that is going to help us better understand what we're talking about in terms of immigration, because it is a very dense topic, right? Immigration is a very dense topic. Every time you bring up immigration, people usually immediately think it's illegal immigration. These are asylum seekers, okay? So you have to understand, a lot of the people that have been stuck in Mexico aren't Mexican. Okay. They're coming from what? South America. They're coming from other countries. They don't speak the language and they're trying to get to the US. And so then what happens is they get stuck there waiting to hear from a judge, right? And they're there and they're open to the elements of what's going on. We have a huge cartel problem there in that border. Okay. There's also this thing that has been ongoing in Ciudad Juarez, which is Las Muertas de Juarez, which is the women there. They disappear. Okay. And they're never found, or they're found in deserts. It's a horrible, horrible social humanitarian issue that's going on there. So we really need to be careful about what we mean when we say immigration, because the topic is so dense and because it does dig some people. It is so much more than saying, well, I'm against immigration. You have to really sit back and think about, what are you against? What are you against? Okay. And then these are asylum seekers. They're running away from their countries. They're running away from cartel. They're seeking outside of that. So, that being said, though, all right, it doesn't get any worse than that, right? Because you got to understand, Biden got into office and received a lot of support from the Hispanic, the immigration, all these people that were seeking asylum, but also with the immigration issues, right? We're wanting to see some changes that are happening. We're supporting. However, it sounds like now he's saying, well, I might go back to whatever Trump administration had. But if the Trump administration was to have these people live in tents during a pandemic and you have children there, we have we have an issue here. We have an issue. Not only that, come to find out that families as a whole don't get asylum. They get separated. And when they get separated, guess what? They're not tracking what family went to where and who. We have an issue with that piece. Some families get separated from their children. So if mom and dad come in there with 10-year-old Juanito, okay, little Johnny, let's just say, and they're at the border, and they tell them, you know what? You, mom and dad, don't qualify for asylum, but your child does. Your child gets to go to the US. Who's going to be taking care of your child? Your child is going to be entering into the foster care system. And then assuming that they don't get lost in this mess, okay? Because no one is truly keeping track of how many kids are going in and out. Families are being separated. You're causing generational trauma, and families get lost. And there is an issue of that. Families have been separated in the borders. These kids get put into foster care. There's a huge human trafficking issue with the foster care system, whether you guys know it or not. It's very real. People get lost in the system and they never hear from their kids again at all. That being said, I don't know. And I'm looking at a comment. I think one thing that McFarland says, cowards shouldn't be leaving their homes. They should be doing what Black Americans have been doing in the U.S. The U.S. has no jurisdiction over those people. Those families are responsible. Well, here's the thing, McFarlane. I think that when you live in a country that is you're fleeing persecution, okay? You're fleeing persecution. You want a future for your kid, for yourself. You don't want your young son to end up in some gang or, to be part of a guerrilla or some other stuff. You don't want them to turn into something. I don't know if I could say that families are cowards. I can't say that. So, you're entitled to your opinion. This is the piece that I would say, you know what? I don't know if I agree with that. And that's because I've seen firsthand some of the separation of families and the difficult decisions that they've had to do. And it's never a coward move. It's because there's no food, no water, no nothing. And you're telling them you're going back to Mexico and you're assuming that you can dictate, that one country is going to dictate what another country is going to do. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Yeah, Queen Bee, I definitely agree with you on that. Thank you, thank you. I definitely agree with you. Now, I don't want us to get confused about this immigration issue because we do have to kind of separate those two. I'm going to share with you guys another video, and it's really kind of like, to me, it's a very friendlier way of explaining immigration. It's very much doubled down a little bit because I feel like the issue of immigration is very dense. We can really get into a rabbit hole when it comes to immigration. Let's check it out real quick, okay? And then I got to show you another thing.
Before we start, if you like our videos, then be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get more from us and to support the channel. It's not often that a policy upsets people on both sides of the political spectrum, but Biden's immigration policy seems to be doing just that. So, what actually is Biden's immigration policy? Well, to understand, it's worth knowing a bit about the US immigration policy generally. US immigration policy is frustratingly complicated, but broadly, immigrants can be separated into two camps: legal and illegal. There are basically four avenues of legal immigration. Number one, family. Number two, employment. Number three, diversity visas. And number four, refugee. Let's start with family. You can apply for permanent citizenship if one of your immediate family, sibling, spouse, parents, or children, is a US citizen. About 2/3 of all legal immigration is done via family sponsorship, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Applications are subject to rigorous background checks, and there's a serious backlog. The backlog for Mexican family sponsorship, for example, is about 20 years long. The second category is employment. Basically, there are 5 types of permanent employment visas: E1 visas for persons of extraordinary ability, E2 visas for professionals holding advanced degrees, E3 visas for skilled and unskilled workers, E4 visas for certain special immigrants, which include Iraqi and Afghan interpreters, and E5 visas for immigrant investors who've invested at least $1 million in a US company that employs at least 10 US citizens. There are a whole load of temporary visas that allow employers to temporarily employ foreign workers, including perhaps most notably the H-1B visa, which allows US employees to temporarily employ an individual with a higher education degree to work in a specialty occupation. Originally, H-1 visas were awarded by a lottery system, but Trump amended the system so that they were all according to salary, meaning only the highest paid would get in. All except E1 employment visas require an offer of employment in the US, and they account for between 15 and 20% of legal immigration. The third category is diversity visas. Basically, if you live in a country with a low US immigration rate, you can apply for a so-called diversity visa. Between 20 and 25 million people apply, but just 50,000 are awarded each year, or about 5% of all immigration. Refugees are those individuals fleeing persecution in their country of origin. Refugees include asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are defined as refugees who are already in the US or at the border. Under Obama, there was a cap of 110,000 refugees. Trump cut the number to 50,000 in 2016, 45,000 in 2017, 30,000 in 2018, and then all the way down to 18,000 in 2020. So that's legal immigration into the US. But what about illegal immigration, the thing that the media gets so excited about? Well, there are two ways of being an illegal immigrant: overstaying your temporary visa or entering the US without legal approval, usually via the southern border. Interestingly, the majority of illegal immigrants in the US come from the former group. For example, in 2017, about 700,000 immigrants overstayed their welcome, while only about 300,000 immigrants crossed the southern border illegally. Illegal immigrants have been crossing the border for years. The US border with Mexico is nearly 2,000 miles long, which makes it almost impossible to control. Before Bill Clinton's Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996, otherwise known as IIRIRA, illegal immigrants were broadly tolerated. Illegal immigrants were only deported if they committed some major crime, like murder or people trafficking, and the deportation rate was about 50,000 per year. IIRIRA expanded the list of deportable crimes to include more minor crimes like shoplifting, and deportations shot up. Since then, other laws like the Patriot Act have made deportation even easier, and deportations in the US have shot up. IIRIRA also introduced the so-called 3 and 10-year bars. Essentially, anyone who's been in the US illegally for 6 months has to leave the US for 3 years before they can become eligible for permanent citizenship. And anyone who's been in the US illegally for a year has to leave for 10 years before they become eligible. This was supposed to discourage immigration, but in practice, it just discouraged illegal immigrants from ever leaving. Pre-IIRIRA, about 50% of illegal immigrants would come to the US temporarily, usually to do a season of agricultural work, and then return to Mexico. Post-IIRIRA, illegal immigrants started staying a lot longer. Anyway, the point is that the US now deports a lot of illegal immigrants. We're not saying it's right or wrong, it's just a fact that the US does a lot more deporting than it used to. Anyway, to understand why people are annoyed at Biden's border policy, it's worth taking a look at it in the context of Trump's border policy. There are basically 7 Trump policies we're going to look at. First, and most obviously, Trump's landmark policy was to build a wall on the border and get Mexico to pay for it. That didn't quite happen, but Trump's administration did at least start building a wall. Second, Trump introduced the so-called zero tolerance policy of referring every single person caught at the border for federal prosecution, which separated children from their families at the border. This is because, by law, when adults are detained and criminally prosecuted, their children cannot be housed with them in jail. Some Republicans claim that this was a continuation of an Obama policy, but that's not quite true. Obama's administration mostly refrained from prosecuting families, although it is worth noting that there was the occasional separation. Third, Trump imposed a travel ban on 7 countries with substantial Muslim populations, expanded to 13 in 2020. Fourth, Trump introduced the Remain in Mexico policy, which forced asylum seekers to remain in Mexico while they waited for their hearing in the US. Fifth, Trump started using Title 42, a public health order that allows the US to turn away immigrants during public health emergencies. And sixth, as we mentioned, Trump cut the refugee cap to just 18,000. And seventh, amended the H-1B visa. So, what's Biden done differently? Well, Biden has basically reversed the first 4 policies. He's paused the construction of the wall, terminated the travel ban, reversed the Remain in Mexico policy, and stopped separating families at the border and set up a task force to reunite any families affected by Trump's policy. Biden has also endorsed the Dreamers program, which allows people who came to the US illegally as children to live in the US without fear of deportation. Trump tried to scrap the program in 2017 before being blocked by the courts. However, on the final 3, Biden has been a little less liberal. He's continued to use Title 42 to expel immigrants at a rate of about 100,000 per month since March. A federal judge has since ordered the Biden administration to stop using Title 42 to return family groups, but the order only comes into force at the end of September. Biden originally tried to keep Trump's refugee cap of 18,000 before being pressured into increasing it to 62,500, which is still well below Obama's 110,000. He's also stuck with Trump's changes to the H-1B visa, which some on the left see as unfairly discriminatory. Now, presumably, Biden's plan here was to go for a sort of centrist policy which could appeal to both Democrats and Republicans, but this doesn't seem to have worked. According to polling by Pew Research, just about 43% of Americans are confident in Biden's ability to make wise decisions about immigration, down from 53% in March. Furthermore, this drop in confidence is apparent with both Democrats and Republicans. There's been a 12-point fall with Democrats and a 7-point fall with Republicans. Essentially, Democrats think he's been too strict with his immigration policy, while Republicans think he's been too lax. In September, for example, US authorities cleared a camp of nearly 15,000 Haitian migrants on the southern border, near Del Rio. Democrats were furious at Biden's decision to deport some 2,000 of them back to Haiti, and photographs that showed border officials on horseback manhandling Haitians. In response, Biden suspended patrols by agents on horseback and insisted that the officers involved would be limited to administrative duties for a bit, but the damage had been done. Republicans, on the other hand, were furious with Biden's decision to permit about 12,000 of them asylum hearings. Republicans also blame Biden and what they see as his soft stance on immigration for the recent surges in immigration. While it's true to say that there has been an increase in immigration at the southern border in recent months, they're also affected by other factors, like the conditions in immigrants' home countries or the cartel's trafficking business, which is why there was a spike under Trump in 2019, despite a lack of policy change. In fact, a 2014 Congressional Research Service report found that blaming any one administration for a rise in border crossings ultimately makes no sense. It's usually down to a wide array of complicated factors. So, what can Biden do here? Are there any immigration policies that would be popular with both Democrats and Republicans? Well, maybe not. Immigration policy in the US is a complicated mess of a lot of different legislation, spread across various different federal and state agencies with massive logistical issues and endless backlogs. Secondly, there's no obvious shared centre ground here. Republicans won't accept anything less than a complete border shutdown, while Democrats are taking up increasingly extreme positions like abolishing ICE, which whatever its true merits as a policy, just isn't popular amongst the wider public. So, what do you think Biden should do? Is there anything he can do that will please people? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe.
So that is one of my favorite, and I'll make sure I put the link in our description box. It's one of my favorite videos that explains a little bit about kind of where the Republicans, where you stand, right? Whatever you vote. And I think that's a really good opportunity to say that we kind of have to put that aside and say this: we have to look at this as a human rights issue that's happening at the border. That no matter what, families and people are being affected, and we have to do something a little bit different versus saying let's build a wall versus saying let's put people in campsites. Like, that's just not the answer, especially when you're involving children. And then when you have an asylum seeking family, you're only able to put in the children and not the parents. And then the children get lost in the system because guess what? They can't care for themselves. They're going to be put in the foster care system. And that's going to cost us a lot of money too. There is no happy answer here. Right. And the pictures of the kids with the cages, I would have to agree with you on that. It is really, really sad. Thank you, Marcella. And thank you for taking this. Children are still not with their families. How's your children? Yeah, absolutely. You guys got to hug your kids, because if you're ever put in that situation, I'll tell you guys a little story. A couple years ago, okay, and it wasn't that long ago, clearly, but I worked with a situation in which a mom had just given birth, okay? This was under the Trump administration, all right? And I'm sorry, it just reminds me a little bit of going through that and watching this happen. Mom was still breastfeeding her kid, and she was deported, okay? They picked her up, put her in the detention, and she was still breastfeeding her kid. Okay, so to think that issues like this don't affect, they can affect, your friends, your families, or even people that you work with, they do. You imagine when a mom breastfeeds her child, it's when they're actually bonding and creating a bond together. And to have that separation happening over some stupid policy, okay? She can't stay here. Who's going to feed her kid? Who's going to replace that bond? So there's your generational trauma, okay? Based on policies that some of us wouldn't even know what to make of them. So it's one of those things where it's like you got to put this Republican Democrat thing aside and think about it in a perspective of I'm human and I would hate to have something like this happen to me and be in a country that would not support me and my kids. And here I am breastfeeding. It's a different way of looking at issues. And it's not the most popular issue to talk about, guys. Clearly. I mean, a lot of people feel some type of way about it. But I want to say this, though, okay? Because now we're having this issue with Biden. There was the New York Times, New York Post, excuse me. They took pictures of kids landing on U.S. grounds, okay, families, unaccompanied immigrant kids land in Westchester, okay, where, you know, there could be asylum seekers. People don't know that this was happening. This is happening under the Biden administration. So I feel like clearly we have a president that is very concerned about what's going on, and they're trying to figure out how to fix the problem. Maybe they're not being very vocal about it, but it's not the answer. If you have to hide families, it's not the answer. So let me show you guys. This is crazy. When I saw this, I was like, no, this tells me that even the president is feeling some type of way about the border.
Bombshell new claims about the border crisis as the New York Post reports the White House is secretly flying planes packed with underage migrants across the country, jetting them from Texas to New York in the cover of night. All this leading critics to wonder why the Biden administration would need this kind of covert operation if it had nothing to hide. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Campagno. I'm joined by my co-host Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany, Fox News Headlines 24/7 reporter Carly Shimkus, and in the center virtual seat, Fox and Friends Enterprise reporter Lawrence Jones. Now, the charter flights from Texas reportedly underway since August, with some of the planes touching down in Florida and dropping off dozens of migrants there before heading to New York to resettle the others, busing them to nearby locations. This comes as leaked documents detail the staggering catch and release numbers under the Biden administration, showing that since the beginning of August, tens of thousands of migrants have been released into the U.S. with little or no oversight. All this as we, as usual, still await the official border numbers from last month. And Senator Ted Cruz says it's clear the president's policies are responsible for the border crisis.
Well, their entire political strategy is based on secrecy. What is happening at our southern border is an absolute tragedy. We've had over 1.3 million people cross illegally. We're on a path to have over 2 million people cross. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris caused this, and their entire strategy is ignore it. And they're counting on the corrupt corporate media to ignore it as well. So, of course, they fly in the middle of the night because they have no defense.
Lawrence, you recently came back from the Texas border. Now, was it common knowledge down there where the migrants were being flown to?
They knew they were going on planes, but they didn't know exactly the origin, the destination that they were heading to. So our people on the ground have long suspected this. Look, as someone that was just there embedded with the Texas Special Operations Unit, they're really the ones that are on the front of lines of this fight. The Border Patrol aren't allowed to do their job. So Texas is doing the arrests and then handing them over to Border Patrol. The big question is, why should the American people care about this issue? Of course, there are laws being broken, but I think the larger conversation is the cartel. This is all a part of the criminal enterprise that the cartel now feel emboldened. They just fired off 2 shots last week at our National Guard. The same pathway that they use to have people pay to play to get across the border is the same way that the drugs are trafficked and human trafficking is going through as well. And right now, the reason why they feel like they can get away with this is because the Biden administration behind the scenes will admit to Border Patrol in Texas that there is a crisis, but when they get in front of the cameras, they say something much different. In Panama right now, there are 30,000 migrants waiting to cross the border. And Texas DPS estimate that they'll cross back to the Del Rio sector or the RGV sector within 3 weeks. So obviously, the Biden administration hasn't learned from the Haitian crisis that happened a few weeks ago. They were warned back in June and did nothing. This is part 2. And if you wonder why Democrat seats that are on the local area of Texas are flipping to Republican, this is the reason. Because it's not a political thing for them. It is about safety. I interviewed a guy crossing the border last week, and when the DPS was processing him, I said, did you get a record? He said that he was deported under Donald Trump. He said, look, the former president just deported me because of my driver's license. We ran his background. He was wanted in 3 states, had domestic violence abuse charges as well, and told me that he was going to go see his next wife. So that's what we're dealing with. Am I saying that all the folks that are crossing the border are criminals? No, but we don't know all the people that are crossing. And I think Americans are frustrated with this issue as well as Democrats as well.
Oh, that's exactly right. So, Carly, let's break this down for a second, top to bottom. So, our president is using secret flights to small airports to move unaccompanied illegal migrants, children, right?
Yeah.
And the reason that he's doing it in secret, one can presume, is so that no one knows about it. And to Lawrence's point, who does know about it are the people in Central and South America. And that's why they are paying smugglers to take their children on this perilous journey north to get onto these planes and then be distributed everywhere. And we are waiting for the border numbers, the border encounter numbers, like I mentioned earlier, but the numbers that we do have, the amount of encounters between Border Patrol and unaccompanied migrant children are enough to fill Madison Square Garden every month in succession, Carly.
Is this the answer? Is this the answer to fix this problem that we have? Because I don't think it is, right? The fact that you're doing it in secret is definitely not the answer. Number 2, the fact that you're still separating families, the fact that they have to leave families, okay, and come back, and now you got so many kids here. Is this the answer to the problem? No, it's not. It's not. Absolutely. You cannot have kids in cages. Absolutely. But I also think that you can't run an administration where things are done in secrecy. You see, this is why I said you have to leave this Republican and Democrat title aside and look at it as a humanitarian issue. Because if you do that, then at least you're able to touch your heart and say, you know what? As humans, what's the answer here? We need better than this. We need better than this. Who's going to take care of these kids? Okay, think of the healthcare. Think of all this stuff. Think of the fact that you're separating them from families, from culture, from their own culture and their own upbringing and their own language. And not only that, you see, the thing about the border issue and immigration is not just Mexico. Every time we bring up immigration, we think about Mexico and Mexicans. We have to be a little bit more broader, okay? Because clearly you saw how even the Haitians putting them in the camp. This is international. This is so many countries, guys. So we have to be very mindful about what's going on. Not only that, how How did we come to this point? Now I saw somebody, I think it was Barbie. Don't get Barbie, you let me know. You said something about Canada not having an issue with asylum seekers. I could be wrong. But let me know about that because I think that that's very interesting. Clearly, because they're entering through they would have to enter from the U.S. to Canada. There's another country, okay? That I mean, we just have to figure out how do we expand this? What can we do? How do we set aside the fact that we have Republicans and Democrats, right? Put those titles aside for a minute and look at it as a humanitarian issue because we do have some problems. And now you have the cartel, which, by the way, the cartel in itself is so powerful. It is powerful. Very, very powerful. Absolutely. And the Haitians too. They want food, water, and safety. Families want safety. Think about the basic rights that you and your family have right now. If you have a television, if you have Wi-Fi, if you have air, water, food, light, consider yourself very lucky. Because you saw those families in those little tents, okay? The mom in Spanish was saying, I'm having to find blankets for my kids. I've been sleeping outside for 15 days looking for some asylum. We don't even know if she's Mexican. Don't assume because they speak Spanish, everybody speaks Spanish there. It doesn't work that way. Yep, Valerie. The cartel was shooting towards our border, guys. Yep. So even the cartels are very powerful. And mind you, it's not just one cartel. You have numerous cartels. People flee their countries because of the cartel. Okay? Because of the guerrillas, because of these little small groups that become 10 times bigger and then they're in the cahoots with the government for the corruption that occurs in those countries. This is why you can't say, don't be a coward and stay in your country. It doesn't work that way. You can't. Because if the US had any of that and we were going to Mexico and fleeing to Mexico, guys, we would have to figure it out as well. So we have to put this I'm a Republican and I stand for this. I'm a Democrat. You can't, and I'm going to just tell you guys, you can't just say I'm going to abolish ICE. Do I agree with ICE? Absolutely not. I don't like the way they operate. I don't like their issues. But it's like saying you can't just defund police. There has to be a real good middle area where we look at policies. And a lot of us, we have a lot more power, being citizens, right? Um, being able to just vote and looking to see, well, this needs to change. I want this to change in my cart, or not my cartel, my ICE or border patrol, not the cartel. They run their own little thing. But I'm like getting see even them. The cartel is a whole organization in itself, right? So you just got to see it that way. But they operate in different ways, guys. You got to think about who's a famous cartel leader, El Chapo Guzman, for example. Okay, I mean, the man the man had an underground tunnel to escape. Okay, listen, I wouldn't put it past him to do it again, right? A lot of people can. I mean, there's ways to do it. If you want to get out of prison and you got that notoriety, yeah, you can do it. This is what I'm saying. It's like don't underestimate the cartel, these groups, because they got a lot of power. They really do. And they got a lot of connections with a lot of government officials. And I hope I still get monetized because I know I'm saying a lot. But let me go ahead and keep playing this.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and the situation with the flights, I guess shouldn't come as a surprise because the Biden administration did this in May. They were sending flights filled with migrant children, but in the middle of the night, and those flights were landing in Tennessee. And I think what's happening is the Biden administration is really caught off guard with just how unpopular their immigration policies are. And I say that they're caught off guard because, and I guess to President Biden's credit, he told the American people that he was going to do this. I mean, he ran on the platform of reversing President Trump's policies on immigration. And during the Democratic debate, when he was asked if his health care plan would provide coverage for illegal immigrants, his hand shot up along with everybody else. So the American people knew what they were getting when they voted for him. And now they see what it looks like and they don't like it. And a lot of even Democrats, because his poll numbers are 23% approval on immigration and border issues, that means that a lot of Democrats are missing President Trump's policies, which is wild because he was vilified for those policies. The last thing I'll say on this is that this is really the first time that our country has had an open border. I mean, even President Obama, he was labeled the deporter in chief. And all it takes is one horrific situation where a Border Patrol agent, God forbid, gets shot, or there's another, God forbid, Kate Steinle situation. And the Biden administration is really going to have to face what they've created.
Yes, and Harris, we talked earlier about the catch and release aspect to this as well. The former Border Patrol Chief Rodney Scott, who served under the Biden administration, he told Fox, he says, this administration is abusing the system. He said, when I was sector chief, we granted 5 to 10 paroles a year. He said the Biden administration has granted 32,000 in 2 months.
Yeah, so the main question is why? Right? That's the main question. I don't know that Jen Psaki is going to approach that answer. We can't approach Biden or Kamala Harris. So if there's no approaching and no answers and because we know we got plenty of questions, I don't know how you find out why. And if you don't know the why, you can't stop it. Like you've got to know, what does she like to say? The root causes of their decision making. I want to get to something you mentioned though, and because you asked Lawrence such a good question. Do the people know where they're going? I want to give you one day's flight plan by Eric Shawn earlier. 6:37 a.m. McAllen, Texas to Villahermosa, Mexico. Round trip 9:17 back from Villahermosa to McAllen, Texas. 7:47 McAllen, Texas to El Paso, Texas. 2:04 p.m. El Paso, Texas to Jacksonville, Florida. Remember, some of the kids are being taken to a detention center outside Tallahassee. 7 p.m. They're still flying.
Yeah,
they've been flying since 6:17 or 6:37 in the morning. Jacksonville, Florida to Westchester, New York, outside of New York City. These planes are busy. And I think the tragedy that Carly was kind of, it's unfortunate. We hope nothing happens, particularly with the grown-ups. But with the children, we don't know because it's all happening at night. There's no accountability for unaccompanied minors. And you know what? You can preach all day long about how that shouldn't happen. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing this at night? What are they hiding? What don't they want us to know? Because you do shady stuff in the shade.
And it's basically
because you do shady stuff in the shade. Do people do shady stuff at night? I don't know. I love how she said that. That I need to put that in a shirt or something. I think it's a great question though. Pure and simple. Okay. Why do this in the middle of the night? Okay. Unaccompanied minors is a huge issue. If you go to your state, just type up, on your state website or wherever you're at and say unaccompanied minors for the state of whatever that you're located in, and figure out what numbers you have that the Department of Human Services can actually report to you, can actually show to you. And find out. And these are kids, okay? The unaccompanied minors is just that. They're in this country without any adult supervision, and they're under the custody of the Department of Human Services because until they turn 18 or until there's a plan out there for them, and they don't have any parents. And so they grow up in the foster care system. There's a huge number of these kids out there, okay, that the system is raising them, because there's not enough resources, support, and they're seeking asylum from whatever country they're coming from. And unfortunately, they were separated by their parents. And now here they are. Okay? So if you think about being first generation, those kids, those unaccompanied minors, are first generation in this country. And they're expected to pull it out on their own because guess what? The system kicks them out about the age of 18 to 21, depending on where their mental health is at. Okay, they're not going to raise kids. The system isn't meant to raise anyone. It's meant to be temporary. And guess what? They have no support because their family is still in the other country. So, this is, what's today's date? Today's the 20th. Today's Wednesday, guys. Today is Wednesday. And I definitely want to make it a point to bring issues here. At least one social human services area, okay? Department of Human Services area. Why? Because they'll have a luggage if they're having to move from a foster home to another foster home based on their refugee status, okay? A luggage is something that they might need. Or maybe it's something like you are able to sponsor a kid that is an unaccompanied refugee minor, okay? Maybe sponsor him for the holiday season, him or her. Make sure that they have all the stuff that they need. Do they have enough food? Not food, but snacks or water. Not water. Oh my God, I'm like thinking homeless shelter. Sorry about that. But I'm thinking like hygiene products, okay? Sometimes they have those holiday drives. I know. I'm laughing at the comments. You guys are making me laugh. Sometimes they have the holiday drives. You know, they do the sponsor me for basketball, sponsor me for X, Y, and Z, sponsor me for other things. So it's a good thing to kind of do overall. Little things that you can do like that. But yeah, get talking about your social issues. You just never really know what's out there. And I think that the even if all we have is 10 people in our chat and we're thinking about this, then that's all we have, 10 people in our chat, right? Just something to think about. Anyways, thank you for hanging out with us tonight. We have tomorrow. What do we have tomorrow? All right, so HBO. Moving on to a different subject. I know I'm just like all over the place. HBO Max did this little thing with Brittany Murphy. Okay, now Brittany Murphy is to me, is a very interesting person. But they did this little like two-parter documentary series. Okay, and first of all, I love the way that they made it. We got to find out what happened to Brittany Murphy. Was she killed at her home, by her husband, by her mother? There's just a huge mystery that goes behind that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. If you've not watched it, I suggest that you go watch it. It's like a two-part series of this little docu-series. Um, I was a little hooked because it's not like your traditional regular lengthy docu-series. I know I would recommend it. It Talks Baby Girl says, "Oh Lord, she's gonna have me on HBO Max tonight." Yes, go watch it. It's really good. I was a little surprised, but it gave me a little insight about Brittany Murphy that I didn't know. That's the celebrity thing, and we have, and it's out there too, the 911 call of when she stopped breathing, when she was found. Definitely, eh, I just learned so much about Britney that I didn't know before. Um, Rest in love. And anyways, I'm thinking about her because of that 911 call. But recommend it. HBO Max has this little 14-day where you can cancel within 14 days of your subscription. Try it out. I'm not being paid by them, but I really should be. I should probably tell them like, hey, uh, I'm always talking about you and doing commentary on your docu-series, so you should probably start paying me HBO Max. Anyways, shout out to everyone in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that I made you guys think a little bit different about tonight's issue. That was my intent. If I piss you off, good. That was my intent as well. Do something about it. That's usually what I say. Alrighty. Fun2Love says, yeah, prepare for homework for class tomorrow. We're gonna look into that as well. We got some other stuff happening on our backup channel. Okay, like I said, we are under review for monetization, which means that we met the hours and we met the subscriber count. So shout out to us for that. Shout out to you guys for following us there. We got some stuff that we're going to be dropping there, so keep an eye out there. Thank you to our members, to everyone that has joined us, and hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your nights because the rabbits are. Let me see where my stuff is at. Rabbits are out. Good night.